Welcome to the fourth installment / episode of Contracts. So far, the first categories of contracts that we looked at, or of classifications, were directed at contract formation. Now we're going to move into a group that is directed at contract performance. So whereas contract formation was concerned about things like bilaterality versus unilaterality, and formality versus informality, express versus implied. Now we're going to move into contract performance. All right, specifically contract enforceability first. Contract performance, and then contract enforceability. Contract performance has two categories: executed contracts, which have obligations that have been completed by both sides. That's an executed contract. And the second in that couplet is executory contracts. These are contracts for which promises remain to be completed on the side of one party or another. That's executed versus executory contracts. With regard to enforceability, one can have a valid contract. And so a valid contract is simply a contract with agreement, consideration, capacity, and legality. Agreement, consideration, capacity, and legality are present. Then, for the most part, there is no issue with the validity of the contract. But there are three other items in this grouping, so it's not really a couplet. So that if a contract can be either valid, or it can be voidable, unenforceable, or void. And those are three categories that will prevent the enforcement of agreements in some cases, right? So, a voidable contract is a contract that could otherwise be valid, but the promises can be disclaimed by one or both parties for some reason, right? Let's say, for example, a contract that's made with a minor when we get to capacity. So let's say that you make a contract with a minor to star on a television program, right? And that's an onerous contract, or I don't know, it's just any contract, right? The child can avoid their obligations under that contract in many cases, right? But that contract is not invalid, right? It's got consideration, capacity, and legality, as well as agreement between the parties. It just happens to be that there's a feature for certain contracts with youth that allows them to basically disclaim their obligations. We'll get to that when we talk about capacity, right? But, for example, even though that contract is voidable, it is a valid contract, right? And if they get to the age of 18 and they're still sort of happy with the arrangement, then they will have, and they continue within it, they will have ratified it. To ratify something, which means to take something that would previously have been voidable, and you're saying, it's okay, I'll take it the way it is. It's kind of a waiver of your legal ability to disclaim your obligations, right? So that's voidable. And so in this, we've got valid, voidable, unenforceable, and void. So unenforceability is a contract which, for whatever reason, there are legal defenses that are present, right? And generally, we've gone over our legal defenses. Many times, they're going to fall into the category of voluntary consent, fraud, duress, and so have you. Fraud, duress, and mistake. So again, and the last one is a void contract. And so a void contract is not a contract. So it actually isn't a classification of a contract, but is a classification of a situation where promises are exchanged and yet no contract forms at all, right? So a void contract, or to say something is a void contract, it's kind of like oxymoronic. It's a contradiction, right? Void means nothing, null, nullity, right? And contract means legally binding agreement. Because there is no contract, for example, if I we form a drug cartel, right? And we have a distribution agreement. That would be void. It would definitely be enforced in some way, but it would not be enforced in a court, right? It is a nullity. It is a void agreement, right? Or certainly an agreement, but it is not a contract. It is not a contract at all. So this brings us, and so now we're going to move from enforceability into the last major category, which is non-contracts or quasi-contracts. And so to this, I would draw your attention to 10.7, Sea West Services Association. So this is a case. Sea West Services Association is a homeowners association, kind of like a condo association, and they operated a water distribution system that served homes that were both within its development and some that were outside of that development, right? So the people that were within this development were full members. They paid condo fees and so forth, right? Those that were outside of the development were still customers of this water distribution system, right? Those were limited members. So both of these groups of people, the full members who live within the district and the limited members who live sort of outside of the boundaries of the neighborhood, they both paid water bills. They were also assessed for work that was done on the system when it was necessary to do so, right? So the Copenhavers decided to purchase a home that was outside of the development, and they did not have an express contract with Sea West, nor did they take actions that implied that they wanted to sort of have a express contract with Sea West. They did, however, pay their bills with regard to the water service that they received for 8 years. However, they disputed $3,950, which were assessed for water system upgrades. So the Copenhavers basically refused, right? And so they were sued, right? They couldn't find a contract because there was no contract. There was no quasi-contract. There was no express contract, and there was no implied contract. But what the court found was a quasi-contract. What did they find? What does that mean? To say that there's a quasi-contract is, in fact, to say that the Copenhavers would be unjustly enriched, or rather, a quasi-contract results. Rule here, a quasi-contract results if a defendant receives a benefit for which one would be expected to pay, they do not pay, and unjust enrichment would result if the law did not impose quasi-contractual liability. All right? What does this mean? The Copenhavers had enjoyed the benefits of the water distribution system services and paid for them prior to the dispute. They just didn't want to pay for this additional assessment. Also, the Copenhavers would be unjustly enriched because they get the benefits of the upgraded water system provided without paying for them, right? So that is known as quasi-contract, when you can't find a contract, including an implied contract. You can sometimes bounce over to quasi-contract. I should note here that quasi-contract, with this rule that's sort of centered on the generally applicable principle of unjust enrichment, is an equitable remedy, and it will only be applied when equity or fairness is met, right? This means that a party who, for example, confers a benefit through some type of illegal or unethical means can't expect to recover in quasi-contract. Certainly, illegality may defeat a contract, but other things can defeat quasi-contract. A party who confers a benefit through misconduct or negligence, right? Even though it might not be specifically outlined in the law as illegal, they'll find that unjust enrichment quasi-contract doesn't avail them, right? In addition, even if a party receives a benefit, it's not necessarily enough to meet the unjust enrichment hurdle. It is a matter of fairness, weighing, and I guess you could say reasonableness. So in the example 10.8, Quest Wireless provided a wireless phone service in Arizona and 13 other states. They marketed and sold headset insurance to its wireless customers. Although it did not have a license to sell insurance in Arizona or in any other state, Patrick and Vicky Zanin sued Quest in federal court for unjust enrichment based on its receipt of a sales commission for the insurance. The court agreed that Quest had violated the insurance licensing statute, but found that the sales commissions did not constitute unjust enrichment because the customers had, in fact, received handset insurance. Right? So what they're saying here in 10.8 is that the couple bought the insurance, discovered that the insurance was illegal, and so that illegality would have defeated the contract, right? So then they want their money back. But then they're saying, well, you kind of got the insurance. We can't, just because, just quasi-contract is not going to be invoked here because there was no real unjustness to you, right? So another thing to remember is that unjust enrichment or quasi-contract is a bald-headed stepchild of contract law, right? This means that it is unavailable in any situation where a contract covers the matter in dispute, right? Jim sells Lisa a furnace. Lisa does not pay Jim. Lisa has been unjustly enriched. Jim, however, cannot sue her in quasi-contract. He's got to sue her under contract law because they have a contract. I'll give you my furnace if you give me money. I deliver the furnace, you send me money. That is a contract. It's a promise for a promise. It is a bilateral contract. All right? So that brings us to the end of the 4th episode. Make sure that you respond to the prompt below, and I will see you next time.